a beautiful courthouse, and it's an old one. It was dedicated in 1917. In fact, when I first came to Winthrop to practice law in 1974, there was an older fellow there that would tell me the story about coming to the courthouse dedication and seeing the exhibition boxing match. They set up a boxing ring in the front lawn of the courthouse. And as you can see, they don't build courthouses like this anymore.
The courthouse was originally down in Henderson, Minnesota. Then back in 1915, there was a vote, and at that time it was a historic moment for Gaylord. Back then it was called the Village of Gaylord, and that is when a vote went through to move the Sibley County Courthouse from Henderson to Gaylord. I believe they started the construction of the courthouse here, the sheriff's quarters and the county jail in 1916. And in 1917 is when they dedicated the courthouse.
Why did they choose to put the courthouse in Gaylord?
Because the people that lived on the western end of the county had such a long way to go to pay their taxes or to do any county business. And one thing I can tell you that I do remember is that the treasurer had established collection points within the different townships in the 1860s or so, because my great-great-grandfather was a collection point for paying taxes. And it was advertised in the paper that anyone that wanted to pay their taxes from like Green Isle Township could go to his house and pay their taxes, and then they would in turn get the money, tax money, brought to Henderson. By doing it that way, not all the taxpayers had to travel to Henderson to pay their taxes.
If you walk in from the south entrance, the original main entrance to the courthouse, and you see those columns that straddle the main entrance to the courthouse, and you walk up the stairs, and then you look up and you see that beautiful rotunda. And the marble work and the ornate artwork that goes along with building this place. You know, our forefathers here in Sibley County really wanted to make an impression on people that this is a building to be proud of. The citizens of Sibley County would be very proud of this building. And also, when they come here, important and serious things are going to happen. What does a judge do to solve problems in the community? In a very narrow sense, my job is to try and resolve issues that people bring before me in a legal sense. That means I have to find what the facts are in the case and apply the correct law. But I'm finding that more and more my job is to try and help people mend relationships. They come here, they're hurting, they're very offended, the other side has done them wrong, and so my job is to try, if I can, to repair those kinds of relationships. That's not always an easy thing for a judge to do, because our court system is not set up very well to resolve those kinds of relationship building issues. What we're set up very well to do is to listen to both sides, decide what the facts are, make a decision. If it's a criminal case, render a verdict, and then give a sentence. But I've been on the bench now for about 23 years, and I know that that doesn't always, in fact, it hardly ever mends the relationships that get broken by people who have to come to the court to help them resolve their issues.
I'd say one of the more fun things that I get to do, and the judge as well, it's either Judge McCarthy or myself, is to perform weddings. So I have a lot of people who come in here to get married and stuff. So we'll come in the courtroom and I will marry them in a civil ceremony.
What is that like?
Well, some of them come in wedding gowns, bridesmaid dresses, the whole 9 yards. Some come here that way a lot of times, and I go out as well and perform weddings. Some of them just come in t-shirt and jeans, and it's like, the quicker the better.
I had a case where young men from two different communities were kind of trash talking back and forth. And they had a challenge came down. And the young men from one town, from Faribault, went over to Waterville to challenge the young men in that town. And they got into a fight. And I think it was over a girl. But anyway, Freddie was I think, the guy that liked this girl from Waterville. And so Freddie's best friend, along with his other buddies, went along with him to try and settle a score and settle a matter. And Freddie's friend, was in this fracas, and he started to get the worst end of the deal. So he jumped into his pickup truck and slammed the door and locked the doors, and there were Waterville guys that were pounding on the hood of his pickup. So he put the pickup in reverse to get out of there, and he backed over and killed his best friend. That was hard. And it just so happened I ended up down in Lesueur County a few weeks later, and probably a dozen of those young men were in my courtroom. And they were not charged with really serious things. They were charged with disorderly conduct, for assault, for fighting, for underage drinking. And it was basically because Freddie's mom didn't want them to be charged with more serious things. And it was one of those situations where I quickly realized that there was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and a lot of hard feelings between these two groups. So I was very lucky that the prosecutor was able to step back and say, and agree with me, that handling these through court was not the way to resolve these relationship issues. So we referred it to a restorative justice process. It's called family group conferencing, where Freddie's mother and father and sister met with the young men and their families who were involved in this thing. And I think it took 4 or 5 hours one night for them to listen to each other. There were a lot of tears, a lot of anger to start, and a lot of understanding to end. And actually that story was reported on public radio. The kids worked out a way to do some community work service. They were walking a highway. They had to write an essay about the stupid things that happened that night. And on the anniversary of Freddie's death, they went and visited his grave as a group. And that year, that just happened to be Mother's Day. So that was one of the most memorable cases that I've had to handle. And you know, the nice thing about it was, and you notice, the judge didn't really do very much in that case. What the judge did is say, you guys, there's a better way to resolve these things.
How have the courts changed since you've been here?
Boy, technology has been a big, big change since I've become a judge. Now, I first became a judge in February of 1988. So we didn't have computers back then. We have all sorts of technology that was not available then. Plus, we have a lot more work now than we had in 1988. There are a lot more judges around, but we're very short on judges, judicial staff, public defenders. We handle more cases per day than I did in 1988, by far. And the trick for me and for all judges, is to make sure that even though we have more cases to process, that we're able to give each case the time and personal attention that it needs. Some days that can be very challenging. As I said, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've heard hundreds, probably thousands of cases in that time. I've been very blessed that usually when I'm able to leave the bench, leave the courthouse and go home, I can leave the work behind. And there's probably only a handful of cases that I've handled over the years that involve, that I still wonder about. I wonder, did I make the right decision? And most of those cases involve kids. The most rewarding part about being a judge, the funnest thing I do is adoptions, because everybody leaves the courtroom smiling. And I like it especially when the children either are being who are being adopted are older, or they have older brothers and sisters, because then I can always have a little fun and say, is it okay with you if I sign this paper so you have a new mom and dad? And they almost always say yes. No, they always say yes. And that's fun for me then to make them a part of the hearing.